we're here now and we look at this cross that's here on our wall, we look at it and we say that, we know without a doubt that it is the center of our church. You know, we look at her with all her beauty. And now, you know, this particular cross here was actually crafted by early individuals of this church, founders who put a lot of hard work into it, with a vision that we would still be here today, surrendering ourselves to it. Now, Roger added the lights behind it almost 3 Easters ago. And you see, this cross has, you know, its own story. You know, it is our story. But what do you see when you look at the cross, or a cross? What kind of feelings does it give you? What kind of feelings does it stir within us? Good feelings, you know, positive emotions. I mean, why else would we hang it? You know, when we look at it, we are reminded of our Christ. We are reminded of His eternal existence. When we look at this cross, you know, we see His crown of glory as He sits at the right hand of God. We are reminded of the resurrection when He conquered the grave, which is why it makes us feel so good. But what Christ is reminding us today through the gospel is that it was not the resurrection that happened on this cross. He did not conquer the grave on it. The cross was a place of something much darker. It was the place of Christ's almost unspeakable suffering. You see, His crown of glory first came through a crown of thorns. And so knowing that, why and how is it that our view of it is so positive? How can it make us feel so good? How can this place of such great suffering bring us such comfort? How has it been transformed? You know, in the cross time, you know, we have seen many pieces of glorious artwork. You know, even in our slides today, you know, of beautiful ornate crosses crafted with stained glass and filled with warmth and light. And they are worthy works of art, but their beauty tends to make us forget that the cross was a cruel death machine invented by the Romans to incite great suffering. Many of us, you know, we wear lots of cross jewelry, crochet jewelry. In fact, I have 3 pieces on right now. But I want you, can you imagine, like, if you were shopping at the mall, you know, you're walking through there, and as you get to the food court, a sweet older woman comes up to you, and she's been looking at your shiny silver necklace. And she comes up and she takes it in her hand and she says, "Oh, what is that cute little chair that you have on there?" And you say, "Oh, this little thing, it's a miniature model of the electric chair they used to fry people up back in the day." Can you see her face? God bless you. But can you imagine our beautiful sanctuary with a crude wooden electric chair at the front instead of a cross? Or maybe just a noose hanging freely? People would be shocked. During the season of Lent, when we are called to take up our cross, it's easy to find the cross as a symbol of Jesus Christ's suffering. You know, that is his symbol of it. But let me ask you, where and why in our sanctuary do we not find symbols of our own suffering? Why don't we see our crosses symbolized in here or in any sanctuary? Perhaps it is because we don't always like to honor, welcome, or willingly accept suffering in our own lives. Perhaps it is because we want the crown, but we don't want the cross. But what if we could transform the way that we see it, though? Much like when we see this cross, we see the good stuff. What if we could look at our own suffering and somehow see the good stuff too? What if? But we are creatures of resistance, especially when it comes to suffering, or things that upset the perceived order of our lives. We don't like things turned upside down. We don't like it. Our plans stepped on, our paths shaken, sickness, breakups, money burdens, death, all those kinds of things, they put kinks in our steps of our well thought out plans of our futures. And we don't like it one bit. And as we look at today's gospel, we can see that Peter and the disciples are the very same creatures of resistance that we are. Here at the halfway point in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus, he makes a dramatic change of direction. The happy, crowd-pleasing, feel-good, go-lucky days of preaching and healing in Galilee are ending. And, Jesus begins to set his face upon Jerusalem and tries to prepare his disciples for the harsh realities that it's going to bring. But the disciples, like us sometimes, are very slow to accept, what it is that Jesus is saying. And to understand really what occurs today, we must first understand what has happened in the verses before. Now, Peter has just acknowledged Jesus' true identity for the first time. He shouts out loudly and passionately, "You are the Messiah." And all the disciples behind him say, "Yes, you are." To which Jesus said, "You must tell no one. You must tell no one." Now, today's story makes it very clear why Jesus said not to tell anybody. Because he still has so much to teach them about what lies ahead, about the reality of the kingdom that he is creating. So Jesus says to Peter and his disciples, "Well, now that you know who I am, there's some things that I need to tell you. In the coming days, I must suffer, be rejected, be killed, and rise again." Now, as you can imagine, this isn't the good news, that he'd expected. And this wasn't, in Peter's plans. It wasn't in any of the first century Jews' plans, because they believed that the Messiah would deliver them from Roman oppression. And certainly, they didn't expect a suffering Messiah. They didn't expect a dying king. That didn't make no sense. That ain't the good news that we were expecting. And Peter's reaction to this is swift and stern. He takes hold of Jesus, pulls him aside, and rebukes him. Rebuke. It means to reprimand sternly or to harshly correct with authority. To give you an idea of the enormity, of this word in the gospel, Jesus is said to rebuke demons. Jesus rebukes unclean spirits. Jesus rebukes the raging wind. But my gosh, it is hardly the appropriate way for a disciple to treat his teacher. And by his own acknowledgement, the Messiah? I mean, imagine the scene. The crowds, there's a multitude of people, and they are looking on. And in the middle of all this, Peter walks over to Jesus, and he puts his arm around him, and he takes him aside to set him straight about the Messiahship. Like pulling an unruly student out of class. Come here, by the ear maybe. But he comes over here and says, look here, my little Lord of creation. Suffering and rejection and death, they are not on this agenda. Forced liberation, prestige, power, dominion are on the agenda. I mean, after all, it's King David's throne we're after. Let's force out the tyranny of Rome. Let's rule the nations with power and with might. Furthermore, Christ, we signed on for a crown, not a cross. Now get over there and fix this. I don't want to hear any more of this destructive talk. You got it? I mean, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I mean, that's what I thought when I read this. And, his attitude, it really reminds me of that commercial that's kind of playing now where the lady's trying to buy the crown jewels. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, how much for the set?" And he's like, "They're not for sale." And she's like, "They're not for sale." And she says, "Just, do you gift wrap? Just name your price." That attitude is the same one that Peter is holding. And so, as you really think about this, you think about, what is going on with him? Why did he lash out? Why did he rebuke Jesus? Well, whatever the reason is, it is clear that he was blinded by his preconceptions of what he thought was supposed to come. And you kind of feel for him. I mean, if anything, you can feel the passion and the varied emotions that are erupting like lava from Peter's heart. The same ones that we feel when something painful or shocking or disturbing comes our way in our life. You can hear his desperation. Death, but my Lord, we need you. We need you, my Lord. You can hear his disbelief. No. I mean, who would kill a healer who heals so many so freely? No. You can hear his anger. Death? No. I've invested way too much. I left my boat, my nets, my father, my life, my wife, all behind for death. No way. And you can hear his sadness. Please, no. No, my Lord. I need you, friend. Don't leave me. Don't leave me. I just can't do this without you. I need you, friend. Don't go. Nonetheless, he still rebukes Jesus Christ publicly, and he doesn't take too kindly to that. He doesn't even let Peter finish. Swiftly, Jesus, in turn, rebukes Peter. He swirls around to face his disciples, and he says to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Those are not words that you want to hear from Jesus. But really what he is saying, he says, Peter, you remind me of when I was in the wilderness for those 40 days. I heard that same jibber-jabber from Satan then, trying to tempt me with human concerns, trying to tempt me to leave this path that I'm on. I will not be moved by you or anyone because I love you way too much. And besides, it's in my Father's plan. So I'm here to tell you, no cross, no crown. Now, as we look at this story, it is real easy to think that Peter done flipped his wig. It is real easy to look down upon him. It is real easy to, yes, even judge him for those actions. We say, oh, how dare he? Of course, we would never rebuke Jesus, never with our words, not ever. Our rebukes of a kinder, more indirect, and subtle manner. I want you to imagine, as I often do, I want you to imagine that you have just walked into heaven. Your time here is up, and as you float through the clouds and you roam through the golden gates, you cross the shore of the crystal sea, and you stand before the glorious throne of the God Almighty. He says, welcome. And then he pulls out a book with your name on it. And he says, as I told you, you must give an accounting of your words and your actions while you're on earth. And you say, yeah, okay. And you go through it with him, page by page, saying, yeah, I did that. Yep, that's me. And then he finishes and you say, is that all? And he says, yes. And before God can get any more words out, you pull out a book from behind your back with his name on it. And you say, oh, before you go, God, I want to go over a few things with you too. Times when you got it wrong. Times when you took things from me. Times when you took people from me. Times when you caused me to hurt. Anguish in my heart. It's time for your accounting. The audacity that we are like Peter. You see, the very truth is that we are more alike than we care to admit. We, as people, have a really, really bad habit of coming here in Sunday or in prayer and saying, yes, you are God. You are the supreme, all-knowing power. I worship you. You are the ruler of the universe. But then life hands us something that we just don't expect. Life hands us a kink in our plans, a monkey wrench in our gears. And at the very first hint of suffering or hurt, how quick we are to say, God, you got this one wrong. I know better. Sounds a lot different when you put it in words, don't it? Why? Why do we do this? What prompts us to take on the audacity of a misguided disciple? What causes us to rebuke a God that we proclaim as such? Like Peter, it's that hurt, the being blindsided, the harsh reality of plans that have been shattered. And certainly, the most difficult hurt of all, is losing the ones that we love. Even though God calls each of us home with this unfailing, exact, right-on timing, the truth is that we never think it's the right time. We never think that we had enough time. And if asked to choose a time for those we love to be called home, we could not easily do so. Because those feelings of wanting more time and the wrong time will come no matter when it happens. It is those human feelings that cause us to lash out, that cause the hurt in us to erupt like lava from our hearts. And it burns. And when Christ sees these things coming out of us, I believe that he is saying the very same words to us that he told Peter that day. My children, you do not have in mind the concerns of God, just human concerns. Just human concerns. And which do you think are more important? And I don't stand here and expect, that any of us, will never get angry, even at God again, because it's a natural reaction since the beginning of time. A good example is when we see our Psalms. The psalmist usually opens up and he's angry, something's happened, why have you forsaken me? You're angry. But he moves through it very, very quickly. By the end of the psalm, he's praising the Father, saying, I know good things are coming again. That psalmist, is exhibiting an arc of understanding, of truth, of self-realization, finding that joy of letting the hurt go, and finding out just how to elicit help from the very place where help comes from. We must be sure, also, as we think about this, not to confuse the source of our anguish, which mostly comes not from God, but from poor choices in the free will of others. And even harder to hear, from the poor choices we make in our own free will. Trace back the steps of your anguish. Our pain is most often none other than those human concerns that have gone wrong. Now, there's one moment in this story that I love to visualize in my mind. I love this part, and walk with me here. Okay, Jesus, he has just told a huge crowd of people that he will suffer, be rejected, and die. Now, through that statement, and even more through the whole rebuking debacle with Peter, the onlookers' eyes kept getting wider and wider, and then he said, get behind me, Satan, and he got wider and wider until that moment where Jesus plainly says, oh, and by the way, if you want to be my disciple, you must go to the cross too. Now, those so wide eyes, which could not get any wider, suddenly popped out of their sockets and rolled over into a pretty little pile in front of Jesus. Verse 34. Not really. But really, in my mind, that's how dramatic it was. That's how flabbergasted the crowd was. Because suddenly, in that moment, the stakes are being raised so dramatically. And suddenly, there's so much more to being a disciple. There's more to just watching him preach and watching him heal. Now, they have to lose their life. Give it up. Forfeit it, Christ says. Wait a minute. I just came to fish, maybe feed a few thousand some bread, maybe watch you touch a few lepers. Not to face the Roman cross death machine. I only came for the crown. I only came for the glory. Not those pesky thorns. In that day, in that moment, Jesus says that they must be willing to die for what they believed, just as he was. And it was the reality of that time period. Now, thankfully, in today's day and age, we're not expected to die for our faith. But it does take on new meaning. And the questions we ask ourselves, what are you willing to let die in your life so that you can live not only now, but forever? What are you willing to let die in your life so that you can be a better disciple? Are you willing to let your mere human concerns die so that you can live for, embody, celebrate, and help bring about the more important concerns that are surely of God? In that way, you must be willing to go to the cross. You must go to the cross. Hopefully your eyes did not pop out. But during this Lenten season, which calls us to deny ourselves and take up the cross, we must understand that the trials in our life, the trials in your life, they are essential. And they are most assuredly coming your way. So as we look around the sanctuary, and we acknowledge, that this cross stands for Christ's suffering, what if we also found symbols here to honor our own? What if we kept on the back wall hundreds of little crosses, each one with your name on it. Little crosses that are to be taken up each time you leave this place, carried with you. What if we carried them with us back into that world filled with human concerns? What if we carried those crosses with us as a reminder that suffering is most definitely in our plan? It's in your plan, just like it was in Christ. Suffering cannot be circumvented, and there are no shortcuts. If the very Son of God did not get an easy ride, then why in the world should you? So instead of being angry towards God, call upon Him. That's what He longs for more than anything. And know that when you get through this suffering that you're going through, this wilderness, it is then and only then that you find your faith has increased tenfold, exponentially. Because you know what? You made it through. So instead of fighting it, avoiding it, complaining about it, rebuking it, go with it. Go with it, and you'll be a better person because of it. It is the endurance of the cross that brings us the comforting assurance of the crown. When you realize that growth and redemption and grace come from your own cross, that is whenever it can be transformed when you look at it. It is when you miraculously find comfort in it. It's whenever you understand that it's what gets you through it, builds your faith. That is when you can look at your suffering and understand that that's how you get good feelings about it. Because you know without a doubt that God is in it. He's never left. He is seeing you through, and it is through those thorns of suffering that precious jewels are being pressed and carefully placed in your crown of glory. May you wear it into eternity.